Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 277 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network and the Alternative Football Network. Ryan and Adam here with you this evening for our first of many CFL offseason updates. We're 2-3 weeks now since the end of the Grey Cup. And there has been the traditional flurry of activity, lots of movement, particularly in the coaching, general manager, and quarterback world around the CFL. Some other notable signings as well. We're going to talk through as many of those in depth here tonight as we can. Adam, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing well. Been busy with everything but the CFL, it seems like, for quite a little while here now. Busy with senior hockey, busy with farming, busy with just work in general. And of course, it's got to be it's traditional Saskatchewan weather right now. Minus 30 and as cold as it could possibly be. It almost feels like Winnipeg.
Hey, I think that cold is coming our way very quickly here in the next couple of days. We got all the snow in the past few days, at least, that's for sure. I feel like you've had a lot going on lately. I feel like I've barely heard from you since we did our season wrap-up show.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, 5 or 6 senior hockey games already that we've dealt with. And, of course, a major injury and accident that happened here in our league. Very fortunate and best wishes and best recovery to Cole Custer of the Churchbridge Imperials. If you haven't heard about the incident, he fell on a draw and ended up getting a skate towards the face and neck area. And if you're in a hockey situation, that's a terrible thing to hear. Very close to being a very, very tragic incident. And all the best wishes to Cole and to the Churchbridge team over there. Could have been a lot worse. 80 stitches, had to be raced to Yorkton. It was an ugly situation. So young kids, if you're watching, that's why you wear neck guards.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And best wishes to him in the recovery from the injury there. We're going to get into talking about all the CFL news here tonight. We'll also take your comments and questions if you're joining us live on very short notice, because I did not schedule this episode early in the day or yesterday like I normally do. In fact, I sent Adam the link to it 8 minutes before we began. So here we are. But nonetheless, we're here. We hope you're here with us as well. And this episode, as always, is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV. You can learn more at GameTimeTV.ca or Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. We will take your comments and questions in our live chats throughout the night, thanks to Game Time TV. So send those in throughout the evening here. Before we go further, we do want to, as always, acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. I'll do the quick plug for the Discord here off the top of the show as well. Join us over in the Canadian Football Countdown Discord community. The link is in the episode description. It's free to join us over there. Conversation, I feel like, slowed down a little bit heading into the offseason naturally. But you know what? As we get into free agency season, I'm sure there'll be a lot of chatter there. And NFL playoffs are around the corner in a couple of weeks. So it's always a fun time in the CFC Discord. Come check out everything we've got going on over there. Big final week for us in the NFL Fantasy League, Adam, that I didn't know existed until a couple of days ago. I thought it ended at week 14, and there's a surprise 15th week, and I have not clinched a playoff spot.
No, you haven't. I'm right now kind of, I don't know if I'm even on the bubble. I think I'm out right now. I think I'm just behind you, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeesh, it's going to be down to the wire. Somehow I need you to lose, and I need to keep going with what I'm doing. But, yeah, had a little bit of a comeback now. I'm 500. But, there's some good players in the league. And if you haven't checked it out before, I think there's a link somewhere I could find to let you see the league that we're all in. So.
Yeah, after I started the season 0-5, I have a shot this week to finish second place in the league at 9-6 after winning 8 of my last. I have a shot to go 8 of the last 9 games here in that league. I've been tearing it up lately, and you know what? Trey and I have been playing this year in the Alternative Football Network League as well. I'm currently on an 8-game win streak in that league, locked up first place, and I'm one of the 4 teams moving on to the playoffs. Also playing against the other member who has had the second highest points scored on the regular season. So good luck to Brian in that matchup, and it should be a lot of fun, and we'll see if I can keep it up. Yeah, I don't know how that league has gone as well as it has for me. 8 straight wins, and I've put up over 150 points 5 times in that span. So it is a level of success I will likely never replicate in fantasy football again. So I just
all I know is in our league, Trey, you was just trash talking me when I took 2 quarterbacks real early. What position is Trey in, and what position am I in? It's a bold strategy, and it worked.
I need to ask this week. So Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen on your roster. Which one did you start this week?
So far, it's Josh Allen. I mean, he got 53 points the last week. Yeah, but it was definitely Josh Allen.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns on the bench would hurt, for sure. Yeah, so lots of fun as we head into the kind of end of the regular season in our NFL fantasy leagues. Of course, I miss my CFL fantasy as well, but you know what? This the offseason's a fun time. It's I almost enjoy the off-season topics on the podcast more than I enjoy talking about the games during the regular season, because I think there's just so much fun speculation any which way this could go. And it's fitting we start with, I think, probably the biggest piece of news out of all of them this offseason, which dropped about 30 minutes after I posted the audio to the last episode of the podcast. Trey and I, a couple of weeks ago, before we get into this, 2 things I want to mention. After you check out this episode, go back and check out the one we did a couple of weeks ago where Trey and I kind of did the off-season preview for each of the teams, and we talked about a lot of these moves, so you can compare and contrast our predictions at that time with what ended up actually happening. I think we got quite a few of them right. And I also do want to mention that Mike had a bonus episode of the podcast the other day that I highly recommend checking out, where he sat down for an interview with former NFL tight end Luke Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. You see him all the time now on SportsCenter with Jay Onright, talking NFL and such. Mike had a good long chat with him about his career and current NFL season and everything in between. So you can check that out on the audio feeds or on our YouTube channel. Highly recommend that. And kudos to Mike for getting that interview in there for some bonus content. Back to the CFL news, the one I was teasing, the biggest news item on here to me is November 26th. The Calgary Stampeders make a trade with the BC Lions and acquire Vernon Adams Jr. Full trade details from the CFL website. The Lions get Calgary's 2nd round pick, 9th overall, 4th round pick, and 2nd round pick in 2026. Calgary gets a 4th round pick this year and a round 3 pick in 2026. And Vernon Adams going over to Calgary. Your initial thoughts on this trade, Adam?
I think the first thing I thought of was, where's the 1st round pick that they're going to try to get out of Calgary? Because it would have been number 1 overall, I believe, for the Stampeders, because I think they did finish last in the league. So I was quite amazed to not see that 1st overall pick move over to the BC Lions. That being said, they got a very good pick out of it, right? I mean, the one why there's only 9 picks, or why it's 9th overall and it's in the 2nd round, even though there's 9 teams, is because the Edmonton Elks gave their 1st round pick this year to pick up an offensive lineman. So they don't have their pick. That one's withdrawn, and there's only 8
I think
picks.
It wasn't a receiver. I thought it was wide receiver Zach Mathis, if I'm not correct.
I thought it was offensive lineman.
I'll look it up. Keep going.
All right, we'll see. Anyways, that was the first thought I had. The second thought was Calgary had to do something, right? Both of their quarterbacks, all 4 of their quarterbacks technically, are a free agent right now. Nothing really worked at all for Calgary in the quarterback department. And arguably they had again, reasonable running or passing game set out for them. Their receivers were okay. It's just that their quarterback couldn't quite get them the ball very often. Whether it was Logan Bonner, whether it was Jake Mayer. Again, Matthew Schultz was injured for most of the season. And of course, Touchdown Tommy has one feature, and that's just move forward. So Vernon Adams gives him a lot of, I think Dave Dickinson looks at Vernon Adams and says, geez, that's something that I'm used to doing because I used to be like that kind of quarterback. If you look at what Dave Dickinson used to do back in the day, yes, he used to threaten to run and then pass, and he could make some absolutely amazing throws. So I think this is a great move for Dave Dickinson and the Calgary Stampeders. Again, they're going to be competing for a Grey Cup in 2 years at home, and hopefully they're competing for it. I think that's the plan. We'll see what else other pieces they can add to help Vernon Adams out. I think priorities on the list probably is a little bit of offensive line and maybe even a little bit of running back, which usually they're pretty good at getting. But interesting enough right now, I would say probably Calgary is still looking for a good run game to complement with Vernon Adams. But VA in Calgary, I think, is a great move for the Stampeders. For the BC Lions, the writing was on the wall as soon as the Nathan Rourke contract was signed. Everybody knew who the guy was going. Yes, he didn't have a great year, Nathan Rourke. He just got back from the NFL. He was taught, 3-4 playbooks, and they were NFL playbooks. I'm sure they're quite a bit different than a CFL playbook. He's going to get used to what he's got in front of him now. He's got 4 months to study it. He'll be getting used to he'll get a training camp in with the BC Lions this year. And I'm going to tell you right now, Nathan Rourke is probably going to compete for MOP again this next year. I'm not comfortable with it. I think it's just 1 year. You're getting back into the CFL. You get back to used to a different system. Next year, Nathan Rourke is going to be very good again. So don't look at the BC. And BC Lions got a few trade-up picks kind of in this. Again, the CFL is such a random thing for draft picks that if you know there's somebody you really like early, take them. But otherwise, yeah, you might have got a great pick in that 9th overall pick. You might not have. Who knows? I mean, we watch every year a first-rounder retire at 26 or 27. Sure. So you never know what you're going to get in the CFL draft. Get something for them. You may as well. You did what you had to do. We'll see what happens. We never heard nothing about the salary caps yet. So we'll hear from the BC Lions eventually and see what's up with all that. But, I like the move.
First of all, I did look it up. Ryan 1, Adam 0. It was wide receiver Zach Mathis selected in supplemental drafts. So I'm up 1 point here early on tonight. We'll see if we make it up throughout the evening. It's not a competition, but it absolutely is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If we go back to, if I try to go back and remember what I said a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, I think this was the day before Vernon Adams did get traded to Calgary. We talked about it, and I think the thing I mentioned was this is a move Calgary needs to make. I'm just not sure they're going to because they don't typically. And I stand by that. This was a move they had to make. I think Vernon Adams is such a character guy, such an energy guy, and that's what the Stamps need right now, is they need a big-name playmaker. They need the energy guy to right the ship here, and that's exactly what Vernon Adams Jr. Does for this team. And you could see it already in the time he's been there. He's been amped up. He's been in photo shoots. They can't get him a jersey number, apparently, for his photo shoots. I don't know if you saw that, but...
I'm sorry, but those Calgary get new jerseys. All I can think of is KFC when I see those jerseys. Unless you got a sponsorship with them, then by all means.
I always think of popcorn buckets, but same thing. Same difference. I think it's a fantastic move. I think Calgary, there are some good quarterback options out there that are maybe more of the young guns than Vernon Adams is. He's 31 now, but clearly he can still play at a top level. He was playing at an MOP level until he got injured last season. And I think Calgary is somebody who maybe needs something more stable than taking a chance on one of the younger guys like Davis Alexander, who we're going to talk about later. on. So I think it's a good fit for the Stamps. I think it's energizing. I think when you're talking about pieces they need to go out and get, I want to see them go out and get some big name receivers. I know there's been some chatter about Eugene Lewis. I've seen people mentioning his name on social media. Can you imagine Vernon Adams throwing to Eugene Lewis and Reggie Begelton? And then you mix in guys like Jalen Philpott and such in between there. Like that is top tier for the Stamps. I think VA is a good addition, but I want to see a shift in the Calgary offensive playbook as well, because I feel like it was so tailored to Bo Levi Mitchell that they kept it tailored to Bo Levi Mitchell after he left, and Jake Mayer didn't succeed in that game. And Calgary's MO has always been kind of, okay, let's throw to 9 different people in the same game. And I don't think that's effective. I think you need to put the ball in the hands of your playmakers. You've got the guy in VA who can do that now. Now I think the offensive game plan needs to be built around that and utilize that effectively.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Vernon Adams does have an arm, and he's effective when he's on the run. You're right. Calgary really needs to re-sign some of these receivers that they want to re-sign. Jalen Philpott has got to be number 1 on their priority list. I mean, they have had trouble getting Canadian receivers to stick in Calgary for a very, very long time. Let's hope that this is this time when they can actually do it, because I think he's on the rise for next season as long as he can stay healthy. Seems like he always has some sort of injury, but hey, for what I hope for Calgary, that's the biggest one. I think is their priority, is their Canadian wide receiver talent, and even Canadians in general. I mean, every team, I could say that for almost any team, but Calgary always seems to have trouble keeping Canadians. They do a great job in the draft. Don't get me wrong. They always seem to bring in a good guy from the draft, but keeping them afterwards is the very tough thing that Calgary, I think, has a trouble with.
Well, you mentioned that. I mean, one piece of news that came out a couple of weeks ago, Cole Tucker, I think it was, right? 2023 draft pick retiring from the Stamps. When you talk about, guys suddenly retiring and moving on to other things, that's definitely in that category. On the BC side of things, I'm not surprised this is what BC got out of this deal, because nobody was going to offer them anything significant, really, because they knew BC was going to have to do something. Like, if they don't make the trade, BC is probably cutting Vernon Adams, and then you have the chance in free agency. So I think even getting a second round pick, 9th overall is still pretty good. And you can make a lot happen with a 9th overall pick. I think that's a good thing to get back for BC. You have to go back and look at 2 years ago. They gave up a first-round pick to Montreal to get VA, and now they don't get the first-round pick back for him, which is a little unfortunate. But I think it was, like you said, a lose-lose situation here, and they had to do it. They had to get something back for him, and ever since Nathan Rourke came back home, the writing was on the wall for Vernon Adams in BC, and I just want him to succeed. I want him to come out there and just light it up this next year, because he is one of the most easily rootable players in the CFL, I think it is. Like, how can he not, right? Like, this guy has been through the ringer with every team he's been through, and every time he succeeds, somebody comes in to replace him. I just want him to light it up. I want VA to win MOP next season. And I agree with what you were saying earlier as well, that I've been saying it all along. Like, we'll get ready for the Nathan Rourke bounce back this coming season, because I think a full year, full off-season, full training camp, no more movement around. We'll talk about his offensive coordinator situation and what impact that could have as well. But I think he's going to bounce back just fine this season. Anything else on the VA trade for you?
No, I think you're right on there. I mean, now they have a little bit of salary cap room, I would think, to possibly bring back that Matthew Betts guy that they need. I mean, they got a pretty deep pile of receivers and defensive linemen and all that need to probably be dealt with pretty soon, I would think. Again, I was looking on there. Nathan Cherry's another one, Canadian defensive lineman that I'm sure there's other teams that'll be looking at. Justin McInnes is a free agent this year as well. I mean, there's some big pieces on that list that they're going to have to address. But hey, they've got their quarterback. They know who's going to be behind center. They know who he works with, who he doesn't maybe work with a little bit. they'll make it work for Nathan Rourke next season. And I expect BC to be pretty strong on getting some of these big name free agents signed well before free agency, I would think.
Talking about Canadian receivers, can you imagine if Calgary finds a way to bring in Justin McInnes for VA now after the chemistry they had early last season? Like, you talk about that together with Reggie Begelton, like, yes, please.
McInnes, Begelton, and Eugene Lewis.
Oh.
That would just be just ugly. For being a Saskatchewan fan and maybe a little bit of a Bomber fan for yourself, yeah, that wouldn't end well for us.
That would be a pretty good stack. Well, moving on to our next news item here. It's the Calgary Stampeders will kind of stick with them. Or late in the season or early in the offseason, they let go defensive coordinator Brent Monson, a longtime member of the coaching staff there in Calgary. One of those surprise moves a little bit for the team. We all thought it was Dave Dickinson's job on the line. Monson gets released. Mark Killam gets released. We'll talk about him later as well. But I don't know if this one's been made official yet at this point in time, but talk is Brent Monson to be the defensive coordinator in Toronto. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Ryan Dinwiddie's a Calgary system guy. You know, half of Toronto is Calgary East. Toronto is Calgary East, and then Saskatchewan is Toronto West, I think is how this works out. So it's a good fit. I think Brent Monson's always been pretty good at his job. I was a little surprised to see him let go in Calgary. What do you think about him going to Toronto here?
I mean, again, Brent Monson, I always kind of questioned his secondary a little bit, just because his secondary always maybe was a weaker spot, but his D-line always was great. His linebackers always were in the right spot. I mean, he had some great ones with Cam Judge and a few others in there that were just really strong players. And again, I was quite surprised. And again, maybe this is just saving your job a little bit because Dave Dickinson, you're right. Let's go of Monson. Let's go of Killam. And both of those guys, I mean, the only guy that didn't take any problem, and I think that was their biggest problem, was their offense. And their offensive coordinator was, I think it was Dave Dickinson. Yeah. So, yeah, there's there might be a little bit of job saving there on why they let him go. But I think he's going to bounce back in Toronto real well. I mean, you look at what they've got over there. They've got some really good pieces, I think, in their lineup. And, I mean, obviously, it's Grey Cup champion. I think the biggest priority now is Monson needs to talk to McManus and convince him to stay. If you're a Toronto fan, I'm sure that's the biggest priority on your list is McManus. And I'm sure there's other pieces in there that you want to keep as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, not Pickett. There was another one that I'm thinking of that was also, like I said, that were big pieces in that Grey Cup win that are free agents, and they need to definitely go and acquire some of those guys back now that they know what their defensive coordinator is. So I like it. It'll work well for him. I think, like I said, Dinwiddie will work well with Monson. And, business as usual in Toronto. I'll be interested to see who Calgary brings as his defensive coordinator.
Yeah, looking at Toronto, this last season, that it was kind of a co-op job between Kevin Iben and Will Fields doing the defensive coordinator job. And that defense came up huge throughout the playoffs with so many turnovers. But I also look at that defense as how many yards and how many points to give up to the Ottawa Redblacks in like 3 separate games against them as well. Like, there have been over the past couple of years flaws to that defense in Toronto for sure. They get a lot of turnovers, but they also give up a lot at times as well. So I think bringing in a guy like Monson here might help out, might relieve the pressure off of those two to work with their individual units, assuming they are still sticking around as part of their staff, and kind of let him, guide the play calling. So I like the move. I think it's a good fit for the Argos. And yeah, Ryan Dinwiddie's going to bring in his guys here. And we've got a question in the Facebook chat from XFL Mike G, a good supporter of the show here. Are there any new coordinators from outside of the CFL coming into the league? Seems like they just get shuffled around. For the most part, it seems like that's the case, right? There's a lot of shuffling internally across the league. As we get into some of our other news topics here shortly, I think this is finally we're seeing new life in maybe upper management or upper coaching roles from guys we've been waiting and speculating for years to get into that kind of job. But I don't know. Do you have anybody in mind that's new from outside the league? I don't think so.
Not much that I can think of, but you're right, Ryan. We see these guys now that were defensive back coach or special teams coach or offensive coordinator, now moving into head coaching, moving into the OC, into the DC spots. A little bit of juggling. I mean, this one here, Monson, of course, is just a lateral one, but that was because he was fired from Calgary or let go from Calgary. But there's some other ones here that, like I said, we've seen some of these guys moving up. Even over in Saskatchewan last year, our offensive coordinator, our offensive coordinator was a running back coach from Calgary last year. So, I mean, there's guys now moving up, and it's they're just climbing the ladder, I guess, in the coaching ladders right now.
Right.
So, like I said, it's been good. And I mean, they're getting interviewed now. Some of these ones that were offensive coordinators and special teams coordinators are now getting opportunities to be head coaches. Some of them will succeed. Again, you look at Corey Mace over in Saskatchewan. Some of them will fail. I mean, you look at Richie Hall over in, nowhere now.
The one that jumps out to me when you say that is honestly Devon Claybrooks. Remember all the talk when he was DC in Calgary, and then he was going to go into head coach in BC. Did he even last the full season with BC? I don't remember if he did.
Nope. And I mean, the other one that I can think of is Bobby Dyson, Saskatchewan. He got moved up, and that did not work well for Saskatchewan. Was fired, and then eventually, I think he became the special teams coordinator in Ottawa. And then after LaPolice got released, he got added in as a head coach, and now it's worked okay. But you know what I'm really glad of not seeing, Mike, is the old head coaches going back and becoming head coaches again. I haven't seen that yet this year, and I'm very happy to see it. There was talk of it. I mean, Mike Benavides was talked in BC. I was sitting there, come on, you can't be serious. Then I heard Paul LaPolice, and I was like, oh, come on. Nobody's going to do this again, are we? And don't get me wrong, those are good guys, and they work well in the CFL. But they've had their opportunities to be head coaches before. And, again, LaPolice has failed twice, I think, now. And, like I said, Mike Benavides has been almost everywhere. Same thing also with Chris Jones. I mean, he's had opportunity after opportunity as well. And it's not worked. That being said, Hamilton might help do it. You never know. But nevertheless, some guys are just meant to be the defensive coordinators. But it's nice to see some of these coaches starting to move up in the coaching ladder.
Yeah, and I think, I'll skip over the order that we had planned here a little bit because it makes sense in continuing this conversation because we've been talking about Calgary. We've been talking about former coordinators moving into more prominent roles. And I think it makes the most sense to then talk about the next big item, which is Mark Killam named the head coach of the Edmonton Elks. Your thoughts on that one?
First of all, Calgary must be just choked at the moment. Calgary fans, that must have just added to the rivalry just a little bit. But no, it's a great pickup. I mean, he's been interviewed by countless teams that I can remember now. I know he got interviewed last year in Saskatchewan. BC interviewed him as well. And I think he'll fit him very well over in Edmonton. That is a team that just needs the right coaching staff more than anything to really turn it around in Edmonton. That team is not that bad. It's actually, again, you look at how it's built. You got Eugene Lewis. You've got a running game out of that three-headed monster that they've had last year. I mean, your quarterback now, again, you've got that solidified. We'll talk about it later. Your special teams is okay. I think maybe your probably return game could be a little bit better yet. Although, again, they have a guy in there in Javon Leake that could turn a ball back at any time. Your defense has improved much over the last year. I thought Anderson had an amazing year. I think it was his first year as linebacker, wasn't it?
He was rookie of the year.
Yeah, he was rookie of the year. So Edmonton's got the pieces there. I think they just need the coach to bring it all together. And, hey, special teams coordinators becoming head coaches, I love it. Again, Craig Dickinson was in Saskatchewan, and he had some good successful years there too. I think that if you got if Mark Killam if I don't know if we announced the general manager yet of Edmonton, if he thinks Killam is the right guy, I think Mark Killam is the right guy for the Edmonton Elks.
Yeah, I think Trey and I talked about Ed Hervey being the GM in Edmonton on the last episode of the podcast. But if you have any thoughts on that,
honestly,
feel free to jump in with those here throughout the discussion as well. But yeah, Mark Killam, special teams coordinator in Calgary since 2010, and let go this year. So another guy just like Monson had been there a long time, and he's always been in the conversation. He's always been very good. I mean, you look at what he's done with Calgary. Like Rene Paredes has been one of the best kickers in CFL history. Look at what Calgary's done in the return games. I mean, Peyton Logan's probably your most recent, but we could go back, and if we wanted to take the time, we could name tons of specialists when it comes to the kick returns for the Calgary Stampeders that have found success in that role. So he's been really good at his job, and I think the best thing I've seen so far is just once the rumors came out and before I think it was official that he was joining the Elks, so many current and former players vouching on social media saying Mark Killam is the best guy you can absolutely hire for this role. And that's saying something to have somebody from a rival team of the Edmonton Elks go and say, like, hey, please hire this guy. And I think I draw a lot to what we saw from the Corey Mace hire last year, where Mace came in, gave a great speech on his first day with the Riders, and everybody fell in love with him there. And I think the same thing is going to happen here for Mark Killam. I think the Elks are doing a lot right so far this offseason. We'll talk about the quarterback situation a little bit later on, because I think there's some other moves that I want to talk about first that kind of play into what direction that went. But I think, getting a coach like Killam in here, as much as I think they could have given Jarius Jackson another try, I didn't think he was bad last year after Chris Jones was out of the way. I also would have maybe given Leroy Simon another try. You've got fresh ownership. You've got fresh president in there for the Elks. They really want to establish a new path forward for this team, and I think it's going to pay dividends for them. I still won't ever buy into the same level of hype I did a couple of years ago with my fateful Taylor Cornelius first-round draft pick for the Elks, but I'm high on what they've done so far.
Yeah, honestly, the biggest move that I think I was maybe questioning a little bit in Edmonton was the Leroy Simon letting go. I thought he was not a bad GM, and I still think he's a very good GM for somebody. Speaking of GMs, over in the comments, FM Fan from YouTube goes and says new general manager in Hamilton is going to make a bit difference. That would be Ted Govia, I believe, is the new general manager over there. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you need a different eye set and maybe a different build. I guarantee that he's going to start to build his team, though. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of a team that is, Ryan.
Yeah, and we'll get into talking about that one a little bit more here as well. I want to stick on the Killam thing here, though, because he's going to have a whole new coaching staff in there too, and I don't think any of these have been officially announced yet. But it's looking like a pretty darn strong coaching staff, because you've got Jordan Maximic from the BC Lions. If you've listened to this podcast the last couple of years, I've raved for the past few years about he's my favorite coordinator in the league. I love what he's done, what he did with that BC offense. Maybe not as much than the second half of this season, but you know what? I think there were some different factors. The energy just wasn't there within the team, but I love the play calling from Maximic. He really draws out the best from his quarterbacks, I find. And so I'm super high on that one. And it's a good fit there. And then who was the one defensive coordinator? He came from the Riders. Was it J.C. Sherritt?
Yeah, it was J.C. Sherritt, defensive line coach for the Rough Riders last year. I mean, I think the results speak for themselves, caused a lot of chaos and a lot of momentum got changed in Saskatchewan from last year. I mean, he had Johnson there, Micah Johnson, looking like a young 25-year-old Micah Johnson. I mean, he was all over the place. They had some great players. Anthony Lanier was developed by him. They've got some. I think the Riders' defensive line is never going to be an issue for a little while here, and whoever gets that got a kind of a plethora of rewards. He did very well, Sherritt, building up that defense in the Riders' side of things. And I'm very excited to see what he does with the Edmonton Elks. I mean, he's got a plethora of fun little toys in that cabinet right now in the defense that he should be very proud of. Again, one of the things I really say in Edmonton that their strength is in linebacker with Anderson. I think they're going to be very good there. And I think that J.C. Sherritt's a guy that's going to bring out the best of the defense for the Elks.
Yeah, great hires across the board here so far for Edmonton. We'll see what effect that has on this team that just needs to get back with a strong season this year. Like, could you imagine after all of the talk this year, Edmonton starts another season like 0-8 or something like that? Like, it can't happen. They need to get out there. They need to win football games early in the season, keep the fans in the stands, and show that they are making the changes. And I think they are making good changes. As much as I talked about, guys like G. Roy and Jarius and having them stick around, giving them another shot. Sometimes you just want to get that bad mojo out of there, and they're not necessarily the ones that bring it, but you associate with them with the last couple of years to some degree, right? So a fresh start in terms of personnel could be what the Elks need here. I'm going to keep going out of order. Don't worry, I'll bring it back in the end. But we're talking about head coaches. We're talking about offensive coordinators. I just mentioned Jordan Maximic of the BC Lions is likely headed off to the Edmonton Elks, which means there was an opening at offensive coordinator in BC. And there was also an opening at head coach in BC after they fired Rick Campbell. And I rejoiced when I heard this news. Former quarterback and turned offensive coordinator of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, also former BC Lion, Buck Pierce, named head coach of the BC Lions, and I believe he is going to be calling plays there as well, if I understand correctly. Buck is another one of those guys that just for years has been named and discussed in conversation for head coaching roles. I want to say in Ottawa he was potentially rumored as well. There was talk even, I think, in Saskatchewan when you were looking for a head coach there about Buck Pierce.
As far as I remember, they said he was offered the job in Saskatchewan and he turned it down in the end. So,
and in Edmonton, and he was rumored to be in the conversation in Edmonton this time around for that head coaching role as well. So, what are your thoughts on Buck Pierce finally moving up into this role and it being with the BC Lions?
Well, clearly he thought that this must be the one that he wanted to pursue because he currently has one of the best and probably most talented quarterbacks. Arguably, again, I know probably Toronto fans argue me on it, but in the league, I mean, Nathan Rourke is pretty much that guy. And Buck Pierce, being an old quarterback, must just be drooling at the opportunity. If he can keep some of these receivers that he's had, that's Buck Pierce's MO, is lots of receivers in your offense, a great quarterback, and all the rest, well, who cares? Not kidding. But you know what? It'll be interesting to see what he does in defensive side of the football a little bit, to see what they keep, what they retain, what they do, and where some of the money is spent. Obviously, that's general manager job, but you know what? Head coach also influences that a lot as well on what he wants to see. This is a team, again, we talked in the Grey Cup about how come he didn't use Brady Oliveira. Well, guess what? Now he has, again, a BC Lions running back side. William Stanback is a good running back, but maybe not used as much as some others now. Buck Pierce has that opportunity to be a real gunning quarterback and be our head coach that is known for throwing. So he's got the guy to throw the ball. He's got the guy that can run when he has to. Be interesting to see, but I think this is why he didn't take any other jobs till he had a shot to be with Nathan Rourke in BC.
Yeah, and that's that homecoming of sorts, right? Back to the Lions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's where he started, right, with BC Lions. So it's a good fit for him, and I think Buck, like, you talk about the Bombers over the last number of years, and the reason they have made it to 5 straight Grey Cups, in my opinion, is consistency, and player loyalty plays a large part into that, I think, and just the atmosphere that the coaching staff creates. And Mike O'Shea is, a huge part of that. But I think some of the coordinators, like Buck Pierce, play a role in that as well. And we talk about the Winnipeg offense, and we are going to talk, we do talk about the futility of their offense for at least the first half of the season this year. They had some explosive games in the mix. We talk about their struggles, particularly when it comes to Grey Cup games and playoffs, and Zach Collaros is disappearing in a handful of playoff games and questionable play calling at times. But you also can't deny that if you look at the last couple of years of just how explosive that Bombers offense was just 2 years ago, where they were putting up 35 plus points every single week. And you've got guys like Dalton Schoen that just exploded on the scene. Zach Collaros revived his career in Winnipeg. Brady, he moved on from Andrew Harris, and then Brady Oliveira, came and is arguably playing at a pace almost better than Andrew Harris did. So Buck Pierce, I think, did play a successful role in all of that. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles the situation in BC, because he has had the fortunes of having arguably two of the best Canadian running backs, at least in the last number of years, in Andrew Harris and Brady Oliveira. Harris is one of the best Canadian running backs of all time. Oliveira, I don't think you can put him in that category yet just because he's so fresh in his career, but I think he could get there eventually. Now you mentioned William Stanback. Yes, Stanback is a great running back. He was one of the top running backs in the league this year. It was a good, strong resurgence for him. But I don't know if I'd put him in that category at this stage of his career. So how does that impact things? Does Buck lean more on the passing game than he already does? How does he utilize Stanback effectively? Are all things I'm intrigued by. And the load management piece.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see. Again, free agency is going to be crazy this year, because that certain players like playing with a certain situation and in a certain system. Yeah. I can tell you right now, there's going to be, I don't know who it's going to be, because they're all so loyal to Mike O'Shea, apparently. But I don't know who's going over to BC, but somebody is. Somebody was more loyal to Buck Pierce, I can guarantee you. Sure. It'll be interesting to see what happens there for that offense, and who goes over and is going to go work with Buck Pierce over in BC. Same thing also in Edmonton. Who's going to want to go and work with Mark Killam, that was with Calgary for many of years?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, Rennie Paredes, I think, is a free agent coming up. I'm kidding, but I'm just saying, you never know.
I could not imagine him going to Edmonton.
Could you imagine the chaos we could cause in this? Same thing the other way. I mean, Calgary, let's say all of a sudden they decide, Jarris Jackson looks like a pretty good offensive coordinator. Suddenly Eugene Lewis might just go and walk over to Calgary. So it's very interesting to see what will happen here on all this. But, I'm interested to see what system Buck Pierce has in place. Again, with a William Stanback in there, I'm guessing it's going to be pass heavy. But, hey, it'll be interesting to see on that. And, I want to see how he goes and develops a defense over at BC.
Interestingly, if you look at the last 2 years, Brady Oliveira has been the best running back in CFL over the last 2 years. But we always talk a lot about how he doesn't get the ball a whole ton early in the game. He has a slow start to the game and a strong finish. And I wonder how much of that is a kind of unique game plan where they say, look, this guy's got a motor, and we're just going to save it for the fourth quarter. And then once everybody else is tired, nobody's going to be able to stop him. And that seemingly worked for them. And so that might work well with a guy like Stanback, who's been around the league for a little bit longer and still has that juice to kind of load manage and then use them to put away games in the fourth quarter. Could be very effective. I'm intrigued to see it. I know fans in Winnipeg, and I would put myself in that category, are, I think, excited as well for the opportunity of a new offensive coordinator to come in, just based on some of that play calling. I don't think it's been effective in the Grey Cups. I think he's tried to do a little too much at times, when probably keeping the play calling simple, handing it off to your running back earlier in the game would have been more successful for them. And this leaves us with the question mark of who will be offensive coordinator in Winnipeg now that Buck is out. You have any thoughts on that one?
That's a good question. Jarius Jackson probably wouldn't be a bad decision, I don't think. He did lead a pretty good offense, I believe, before, and I think he could do it again. Kahari Jones would be probably the local favorite pick, I would think, in BC. In Winnipeg. I'm sure there's lots of talk about the greatness of Kahari Jones when he was the quarterback, and I'm sure that there's lots that remember how he was when he was a head coach for a little bit in Hamilton and how people would run through walls for him. He wouldn't be a bad pickup as well. I don't see any real lateral moves over. Again, Mark Mueller's, I think, pretty happy in Saskatchewan if he's going to be an offensive coordinator. Plus, also, Ronnie Lancaster's grandson coaching the Winnipeg Blue Bombers offense. Come on, no. There's other options out there as well that you could probably think of. But, yeah, and the other option is, I guess Mike O'Shea is more of a special teams guy. I don't think he'd be running the offense by himself.
He better not be. He better not be.
I mean, I would pay to see that. But, I mean, probably Winnipeg fans would be on riot control at that moment. And again, like I said, maybe it's somebody right completely from left field that we're not even thinking of. Again, you could be looking at maybe a Paul LaPolice coming back as the offensive coordinator. And he was a very good offensive coordinator. Mike Benavides. Don't think so.
He's a defensive guy.
Oh, he's a defensive guy. Never mind. Yeah, there's other ones out there that I'm thinking of. The old coordinator for Hamilton. No.
Tommy Condell is employed by the Ottawa Red Blacks. Don't even go there.
Anyways, my first two choices, though, I would think, if I was thinking of anybody, the two that I would probably go with is Jarius Jackson or Kahari Jones. I think either one wouldn't be really a bad pick up for the Bombers.
Yeah, those were the exact two names that I think are the front runners in the category for me. That I would be most excited to see. My right-in answer is Zach Collaros. Hang up the cleats and pick up the clipboard. But I think when we start talking about some of the quarterback moves around the CFL, I might actually not be in that category anymore. Because we'll get into some of that quarterback movement around the CFL. But hey. Presumably, I think everybody's eyes are on assuming Zach Collaros is going to come back for this year. I know he's getting up there in age as well, but contract's up at the end of this year, hosting the Grey Cup this year. Everybody's kind of picturing that rebuild for Winnipeg coming after this season. And so how much time does he have left? Does he want a role like that eventually? Who knows? But that's, I think, in the conversation for any of these quarterbacks that are nearing what many would call the end of their career.
Another coordinator that I was thinking of, Matt Nichols. He might make actually a good offense.
Hey, Matt Nichols.
Game manager. I mean, he could manage that offense maybe very well.
200 yards passing every single game. Here we go. That's all you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I miss Matt Nichols. Matt Nichols is great. You got a raw deal.
I can guarantee it won't be Darian Durant.
Can you imagine they ask him to come be offensive coordinator? He takes another $70,000 and then leaves again.
Good times.
He's just coming in for his bi-yearly payment and then walking. He can't get away with it again, can he?
I'm sure somebody on Breaking Bad would get that one.
Did I make a Breaking Bad reference? Great.
Yeah, you really did, actually, with Jesse Pinkman.
Oh, perfect. Never seen the show, so you're welcome. So we talk about the vacancy there at offensive coordinator now for the Bombers, with Buck Pierce going over to BC, wishing him all the best in that role there. We'll stick with the Bombers, I guess, and go to FM Fan in the YouTube chat a little bit ago mentioned a new GM in Hamilton going to make a difference, and that's Ted Gavaya, who has been with the Bombers for 10 seasons in assistant GM roles, is now finally getting his shot after being in conversations, much like Buck Pierce, with other teams for many, many years now. Is going to be the new general manager and director. I think just new general manager for the Hamilton Tiger Cats after Ed Hervey ended up going over to Edmonton What do you think on him getting a shot here in Hamilton?
I mean, you look at what Winnipeg's brought in for talent out of draft, out of signing. I wonder how much of that was Ted Gavaya. How much of that was also Danny McManus? To me, don't get me wrong, I like Ted Gavaya. I think he'll be a good general manager. My thing was this. You had a guy that used to be the Ticats quarterback for a very long time. He's well known in the community, and he's known for bringing American talent into the league. Ask Dalton Schoen or those kind of guys. That's the guys that Danny McManus has found. I would have went with McManus myself. That being said, I'm sure Ted Gavaya has brought in some serious talent also in for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers over through, 10 years, you said? He's been a good assistant manager. I think he's going to be a good pickup for the Ticats either way. But just my own thought and being the devil's advocate, I would have went with Danny McManus.
Yeah, I think that's been part of the conversation between McManus and Gavaya, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. They've both been such contributors for the Bombers over the last couple of years, and they've done a great job. I think it's been a tag team effort of finding new talent and doing what they can to keep together the current one. I don't think all the success in the GM role the Bombers have had can just be on Kyle Walters' plate. I think they have played a huge role into there, so I'm excited. Excited for these guys that have contributed in assistant roles for this long to get that shot. And I want to know what he's going to do with the Ticats. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure going over to Hamilton with how long the drought has been there for them. He was also a part of ending that drought in Winnipeg. So maybe he can bring a little bit of that luck over to the Hamilton Tiger Cats here. He played a big role in scouting, I know, for the team. And, I talked about this a few weeks ago that Hamilton is one of those teams to me where I think they can almost stick with the status quo this offseason and be very good next year. I think they came on really strong with a lot of good pieces at the end of the season. They have a lot of young talent to work off of this year. So I want to see what kind of job he's going to do as the GM. Is he going to want to come in and make a big splash? How much is he going to overhaul things versus how much is he going to see the kind of momentum that they carried forward from the end of the season and stick with these guys going into next year?
Yeah, he does have pieces going in with them in Hamilton. I mean, I'm liking what they're doing in receiver. Even their defense has really improved as well. I think the biggest question, though, that he's got to answer, and again, if he had a comeback season last year, and I mean, he was a nominee for most outstanding player in the East, was Bo Levi Mitchell. And I mean, that's going to be everybody's question again. Is Bo still going to be the same Bo as last year? If he is, well, boy, they sure got a team coming up in Hamilton. When you look at guys like Greg Bell and you look at Shamar Bridges and some other pieces in that offensive line that I can think of, they definitely have an offense that can really work well with Bo Levi Mitchell, apparently. But what I want to see now is that they take that next step. They start playing in June and July and August the way they did in September and October. If they do, and Gavia gives them those last pieces that he needs to just kind of finish this up, Hamilton could look pretty good next year. And I mean, I think me and Trey were a little bit lower on Hamilton last year. You were a little bit higher, I think, on Hamilton. But, we were all kind of laughing at the beginning of the year at Bo Levi Mitchell. And, I'll tell you right now, nobody's laughing anymore. They're seriously looking at him. And if he can play the game he did last year, this could be a pretty good Hamilton Tiger Cats team. Hopefully Gavia can give them those last pieces that they need.
While you were talking there, I watched the intro of his press conference with the Ticats, and it is Ted Gavia, so we got that one right. So Ryan 2, Adam 1. We both get a point on this one. I'm still in the lead here tonight. Yes. We've talked about it. I think they have one of the smallest free agent lists out of any teams coming into this offseason as well. Notable players that I think will be, talked about. Keandre Smith, Stephen Dunbar at wide receiver, James Butler. Does the new GM have any change in direction? Like, you would assume Butler is gone, but what if Tobias sees something different with Butler, right? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Greg Bell is the guy. He has to be the guy at running back. You've got some offensive linemen: David Beard, Evan Johnson, Joel Figueroa, a couple of defensive linemen, and only like a handful on the defense only. So doesn't have a ton of free agents. He has most of his roster under contract. So what tinkering does he do? And what kind of scouting and new pieces, because we know scouting is his strong suit, is he going to be able to bring in say, those training camps if they're not active in free agency are the things on my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other question he's got is, as far as I know, a certain Tim White has a big contract right now from last year that was signed. It was a 2-year deal. Is it time to maybe think about moving on and getting some pieces for Tim White and making a trade? There's teams that would take that contract on, and I'll tell you, it's a pretty intriguing trade possibility to get some pieces, maybe those last 2 pieces that you need for Hamilton. And again, I don't know if it would cost you a whole lot. Talent. I mean, don't get me wrong, Tim White is a talented player, but his beginnings of the season are terrible on average. Never does start very well.
No.
You could probably get a good piece back for Tim White that you really need. I wouldn't be surprised that Ted Gavaya, the first thing he's known for is a massive trade.
I can't see it. When do we ever see a trade like that, like a big name for going lately in trades like that, especially at wide receiver? I don't see it. I think there's enough out there on the free agent market for teams looking to make an upgrade that they're not going to give up an asset for that. And I don't think he's a piece Hamilton. I think he's a piece Hamilton would look to continue to build upon. He was my number 1 ranked receiver, or number 2. I think I had Alexander Hollins as number 1 coming into last season, and Tim White in at number 2 there. So and he still had a fantastic year this year. I think he's still a piece that this team sticks with for quite some time. But I do like the spiciness of your take there, Adam. Let's get into quarterback talk. Let's start talking some quarterbacks here. The last trade 1-for-1 was Toronto and Edmonton last year. I guess Curly Gittins Jr. and Jake Ceresno was a pretty decent deal. Not gonna lie.
That was a pretty massive deal when you think about it. I mean, Canadian receiver for defensive lineman. That don't happen very much in the CFL, but
that was one of the more surprising, notable trades in there for sure. All right, let's talk quarterback news. Let's backtrack a little bit. We've moved to just the last couple of days and talking about some of this head coaching news. Let's go back to November 27th here. We had this debate on the last episode of the podcast a couple of days before that. What direction did the Montreal Alouettes go at quarterback? You have Cody Fajardo, who is playing at an MVP pace. MOP pace before he had his injury, some of the best football of his career early last season. Then he had Davis Alexander come in and win 4 straight games in relief and actually look pretty good down the stretch once he finally got his opportunity. And there was speculation this is the direction they'd go, and the Alouettes made this official by signing quarterback Davis Alexander to a 3-year contract extension, keeping him under contract through the end of the 2027 season. He is effectively, with that deal, their guy, their starter going forward. And while he's still a member of the Montreal Alouettes at this time, Cody Fajardo reasonably will not be a member of the Montreal Alouettes in the very distant, very near future. As I think he has a signing bonus coming up in January on his contract, and the team is likely to trade or release him ahead of time. Do you feel this was the right move for Montreal?
It's a very, very risky move by Danny Machocha. He knows that this team can win a Grey Cup right now. Cody Fajardo's taking him to the promised land. He's got Phil Polk coming back next season. He's got Julian Grant. He's got Austin Mack. He's got a lot of pieces on this team that could win him a Grey Cup right now. And again, I didn't even bring up the defensive side of the football. He's got Beverett under contract, who was re-signed earlier. He's got a lot of pieces. Darnell Sankey, I believe, is a free. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check on that one. But again, so many big pieces in Montreal that could win him a Grey Cup right now. Am I saying this is the right move? I don't know right now. I've watched this situation play out before where a guy's anointed the new quarterback and fallen miserably. See James Franklin. Even to look at Jake Mayer, for example, recently. They got out of Bo Levi Mitchell's big contract in Calgary, but then Jake Mayer, I don't want to say he wasn't the guy, but he wasn't what they expected him to be. Davis Alexander looked great when he was in. He looked like a guy that should be playing and started and running right now. And I liked watching him in tandem with Cody Fajardo playing games. I still think, though, in the CFL, you need two good, reasonably starting caliber quarterbacks on your team at all times. See injuries to, again, so many teams I could list off. Saskatchewan, I mean, if Zach Collaros went down, you've got Chris Streveler. Now, I don't know if he's going to be re-signed. That being said, I mean, it was the same thing. Why they brought Nathan Rourke in for when Vernon Adams went down right away? They had Nathan Rourke right there and ready to go. It's one of those situations where you got to have almost two starting quarterbacks. We'll see what happens here in the off season here. Maybe Fajardo reworks his deal and sticks around in Montreal, and it's kind of like that player mentor kind of guy. I don't think Cody Fajardo is the type to do it. I think he's competitive and he wants to play and be the number one somewhere. Unfortunately, there ain't very many number one spots in the CFL. There's only 9 of them, and I think Fajardo might be the odd man out again. From the small sample size I've seen, I like the signing by Montreal because he could be a very future great franchise quarterback, or he could be a dud. It just seems like it's one or the other lately with the teams. I would have rather seen Davis Alexander sign with a team that has an old quarterback and gets thrown in there in situation versus just being the guy right now.
Darnell Sankey is under contract. He is not on the free agent list, so it's 2-2. I'll give you a point for that one for guessing that correctly, because I believe you said that he was. So kudos on that one. It's all tied up in whatever this competition means. I will disagree with your take on Davis Alexander, though. I think this is the right move for Montreal. I think when you have somebody with the talent that he's displayed so far early this year, yes, Cody Fajardo is still talented, but he's had injury troubles. He is getting up there in age as well. How old is Cody Fajardo? He is born 1992. I don't want to do math on a podcast. Wikipedia, tell me how old he is. He's 32 years old, so he's a year older than Vernon Adams.
I feel so old all of a sudden.
So he's a year older than Vernon Adams, and we talk about VA in a somewhat similar category of definitely a guy that can still play. I just would hate to see them lose Alexander, and if they didn't lock him up to this extension and give him the starter job right now, I think they would have lost him to a starting job somewhere else. Alexander was the top-notch guy I wanted in Winnipeg. I thought he was the perfect, if you can't get rid of Zach Collaros now, you sign Alexander as the backup and he takes over next year. And I think he would have probably taken that over the job behind Fajardo if that's the case. Yes, it's risky. It's a bit of an unknown, but I applaud taking that risk for them because I think it's something that is going to pay off. It's tough because you see the success, you see the guy that's delivered success for years. You don't want to move on from him, but sometimes you have to move on when the moment doesn't feel right, but it turns out to be. And going back to Winnipeg, I think we've seen both sides of that. They moved on from Andrew Harris at the right time to keep Brady Oliveira, who just won MOP this season. If you look back at this year and his hindsight 2020, if they keep Drew Brown and move on from Zach Collaros, who struggled throughout the year and struggled again in the Grey Cup, are the Bombers Grey Cup champions this year? I don't know. There's a lot that could play into that. Part of me thinks Toronto just played so well out of their minds in that game that they were not going to be stopped regardless. But it's a tricky thing in sports to move on from a guy at the right time. And I don't know if this was the right time with Fajardo, but the injury definitely affected him, and he wasn't playing quite the same in the second half of the season. And maybe it's telling that this is the right move when I think we can move into the topic of, is Fajardo going to get a starting job? Is he going to have a job this year in the CFL? I don't know.
I think we're going to have to wait for an injury. I think you're right. You said that one earlier, so I'll give you a point for that. Fajardo, right now there's a 9-team league, and there's 9 starting quarterbacks out there that are going to be going and competing. I mean, there's going to be injuries in the CFL. It's clear and obvious that quarterbacks get injured. You look at some of the older quarterbacks in this league, Zach Calaros, Trevor Harris. You've got Vernon Adams isn't that old, but Bo Levi Mitchell's not a young quarterback anymore. And who knows who else could be potentially in there. Even Vernon Adams Jr., he has had injury issues. 2 years in a row, he has had an injury for a little while. Calgary doesn't have a backup right now, really, signed of any sort. Saskatchewan doesn't. Winnipeg doesn't. Even Hamilton doesn't. I think, though, that they probably will go with Taylor Powell. I think they're very comfortable in Hamilton going behind Bo Levi Mitchell with Taylor Powell. The other 3 don't really have that solidified starter, I don't believe. Shea Patterson's played good when he's gone in. I think every Saskatchewan fan probably has a lump in their throat when he pulls the ball off the line on 3rd down, but that's a different story. Calgary has absolutely nobody behind him right now. I mean, nobody's behind Vernon Adams. There's nobody. Nobody signed. I don't see him bringing back Bonner. I don't see him bringing back Mayer. And I don't know about Matthew Schultz because he's been injured for very long. We know about that.
But does Fajardo want to come in and be a backup somewhere? And I can't take credit for this take. I saw it on social media, and I apologize. I don't know who I saw it from, but I saw somebody making that suggestion that you just talked about of, instead of signing somewhere to be the backup now, is he better off just playing the waiting game? Because most starters are going to get injured at some point this year. Is he better off waiting for the right opportunity to jump in and be the starter?
My opinion is no, because we've seen this year with Nathan Rourke what happens when you sit and don't have a training camp.
True.
Right? Nathan Rourke looked terrible this year. I don't care what anyone says. He did not look like a CFL MOP from 2 years ago. If you don't know that playbook and you're just getting used to it, it's very tough to learn that playbook. And actually, I apologize. Calgary does have a quarterback also signed behind him. I believe PJ Walker did sign.
Oh, yes.
So I apologize. I did say that wrong. Anyways, to me, I think he needs to be at least behind a quarterback for a little bit, being, again, training camp time. So if it's Saskatchewan, if he wants to sit behind Trevor Harris for a little bit, the injury's coming. I mean, there's going to be a time, unfortunately, that Trevor Harris is going to be out. It's just the way it works. I'm sorry, when you got a 39-year-old quarterback, you're going to have that. So that being said, do they share the number 7 in Saskatchewan? That'd be incredibly awkward. But same thing in Winnipeg. I don't care what anyone says. Zach Calaros has been lucky that he's been healthy for this long and should be very fortunate because, honestly, look at what happened to their backup quarterback. Chris Trevler ends up getting his knee absolutely destroyed in a play. All it takes is one play, and unfortunately, plays happen. But I think it's worse for Cody Fajardo to not be in a training camp than being in a training camp and sitting behind somebody.
I think what Tim says here in the YouTube chat, Tim from the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, go check that out. I think Cody will either restructure his contract or retire. I think that might be what he's forced into. And it's sad because he's still playing some very good football. And he's kind of always been discredited to some degree. And that might be the direction he has to go here. Because I don't know if he's getting the shot that he probably deserves and is willing to, as teams have been shoring up their quarterback situation. Let's move on to some more quarterback news. You talked about him already, so let's go straight there. Trevor Harris signs a 1-year extension with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I believe Harris is 38 years old, correct, at this point in time. he had himself a decent year, had some injury issues in there once again this year as well, but I thought he was playing pretty good at the start of the season when the Riders jumped out to their strong start to the year, at least. What do you think? Trevor Harris, you happy to see him back for another year?
I'll put it this way. I'm glad he's back. I really need a backup plan behind him. It's as simple as that with him. He had one of his best years probably as a CFL player last year, minus the injury. If you look at his stats, his completion percentage was utterly incredible. I think if it was just behind Cody Fajardo or just behind or just in front of Cody Fajardo for almost record-wise for completions and touchdown passes to interceptions. I mean, most years he's kind of that 500 kind of throws interceptions, throws a touchdown. This year here, he had a great year in Saskatchewan when he was playing. That being said, when he wasn't playing, Saskatchewan held its breath for a very, very long time. And there were some dark, dark days in Saskatchewan right around Labor Day or Banjo Bowl. For sure, I think Harris did come back about that time, but it was pretty dark for a while in Saskatchewan when Harris was gone. So I like the deal. It sounds like it's a little bit less than last year. Everything sounds good and sunshine and rainbows on it. But my thing is, if you don't have a good backup quarterback behind this and don't have a plan for a backup quarterback, this could turn ugly really quick in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, and Shea Patterson's not signed right now, and I'd honestly be comfortable potentially if I was Saskatchewan bringing Shea Patterson back for another year. I thought he saw some flashes in there. Other than that, you look at options perhaps around the league for their backup role. I mean, Cody Fajardo, if he wants to come back there to be a backup. Jake Mayer, where is he going to land? I feel like I've seen a lot of Jake Mayer to Saskatchewan talk. McLeod Bethel Thompson, I don't know. I think he's done with the CFL, to be honest. And then there's other guys around the league. You know, you've got Cameron Dukes, you've got Dustin Crum, are both free agents. I'd put them in that kind of next category of younger QBs that I think a lot of teams could be fighting for in free agency. I think Trevor Harris bringing him back, I don't have a problem with it. Like I think I agree they need that backup plan. They need that future plan there for the Riders as well, because how long does he have left in the tank? But I think he is still one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL. He was the all CFL or all-star or whichever one it is now. I think it's all CFL quarterback for the West Division this year, which says a lot given how much time he missed due to injury there, and to still achieve that for him. There weren't a lot of great options in the West Division, so take that with a grain of salt. But I do think Trevor Harris was a good player there. The Riders have a ton of free agents this year. Like we talked about Hamilton being kind of status quo. Saskatchewan has a ton. One spot they don't have many free agents is wide receiver. They're pretty well shored up at wide receiver and have so much talent there. And Trevor Harris is a guy that can deliver these huge games. He also has problems getting the ball into the end zone at some times. So I think with the right receiver core, it's a younger receiving core with a number of those pieces. You give them the veteran quarterback. I like that for helping them grow. And then you get the young contingency plan. What they need to finally do is get an offensive line that stays healthy, and that will go a long way to getting a healthy Trevor Harris. And I just wonder who the big free agent acquisition that's going to have a terrible injury is going to be this year, because it happens every time for the Riders.
I mean, Stanley Bryant's a free agent, isn't he?
He is not anymore.
Oh, he was re-signed. Okay, never mind. Yeah, you know what? I think that's the biggest thing with Saskatchewan is they need. It's not that you need offensive linemen. You got lots that were signed at one time, but you know what? You need consistency. You need the same guys in the field at the same time for more than one game. That would really help, I think, this team. I mean, again, you look at what offensive linemen are available. I believe it's Peter Godbury. You've got Philip Blake. You've got Noah Zur. You've got Zach Fry, I believe, is a free agent as well. So many guys in Saskatchewan that are free agents, but some of them will stay. I mean, Fry probably will. Zur is a Saskatchewan kid. Those guys are probably going to stick around. But you got to get guys that can stay consistently healthy. There's got to be lots of offensive linemen. And again, that's always seems like the year. Like we always are signing offensive linemen in Saskatchewan. let's hope Yoshi Hardrick stays healthy this year. He's still signed as a Rough Rider. Now I've went off track on Trevor Harris. I mean, again, it trickles down because if your old line isn't staying healthy, you're off. Your quarterback has to run. Yes, everybody says all the time Trevor Harris has a quick release. He does, but you got to still be able to move a little bit when you have a poor. I won't say poor, but again, rotating offensive line. So you know what? They need that extra quarterback because I guarantee that again, it's going to be one of those years in Saskatchewan where yes, you got the talent in the receiving core, like you just said. The running game, you still have AJ Ouellette. I'm sure that they're probably going to try to re-sign Raquel Armstead. I'm guessing Frankie Hickson is going to be the casualty. And that being said, I mean, running backs are running backs. It seems like you could pick up one that'll come from nowhere and be an all-star. But again, your quarterback is an important piece. And if Trevor Harris is the guy you're relying on and leaning on to be healthy for 18 games, you're kind of kidding yourself to be at this point. It's just being honest.
I successfully managed to knock my microphone down on my desk. So if you can confirm that you can hear me now, Adam, that would be great. Okay, we're good. Because you never know. I've been using this microphone for like a year and a half now, and I still can't tell if the light should be solid or flashing when it's actually on. So looks like solid is the way to go.
Solid's definitely the way to go.
All right. There we go. That's good to know. I finally learned that way too many episodes later. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there on Trevor Harris and the Riders. And then our final major quarterback piece to talk about is the one I think I'm most excited about here, which is quarterback Trey Ford signs a 3-year contract extension with the Edmonton Elks. We didn't think it would happen. Everybody thought the relationship between the Elks and Trey Ford was damaged after all of the handling of him the last couple of seasons. But new ownership, new president, new GM, new coach. Maybe they all played a role into this to bring Trey Ford back for another 3-year extension here. And if you're signing him for 3 years, you better darn be making sure you put him in as the starting role. Can you imagine? 3-year contract, Trey Ford. Oh, yeah, in April, we decided we're bringing McLeod Ethel-Thompson back for another season and to compete for the starting job. I think, he's going to talk about in all his press conferences and training camp and whatnot that he is being given the opportunity but needs to still earn the job. He's done everything in the last 2 years to earn the starting job for the Edmonton Elks here. And I think this was the only spot in the CFL he was going to get a starting job this upcoming season. And I'm just so excited for him. Canadian kid. He's been explosive. He's been a lot of fun to watch his running ability the last couple of years in particular. I want to see how he develops now more so as a passer, I think, is the next step for him, which he's on the right track for. And they need to give him the reins and just let him go loose in game 1 of the CFL season. You can't wait till game 8, game 10, like they have the last couple of years to decide to put their best quarterback out on the field.
Absolutely. I think that I'll go and actually steal a Breaking Bad quote of my own and just say, let him cook. You know what? He's done everything, you're right, as what a quarterback needs to do to earn a starting spot in this league. Again, from wild passes to running footballs that I don't even think running backs can sometimes run, to doing anything else that the Edmonton Elks staff had asked of him. I mean, there's nothing else he could have done to earn this job. And I think if he doesn't get it and they bring something else in, just contract a team. Enough of this with messing with Trey Ford this much. I mean, you're right. There was no other starting jobs available. I mean, he could have went to Winnipeg and hung out with his brother Tyrell. And
he might bring his brother to Edmonton.
Yeah, that's the other option, right? I mean, there was maybe that, but again, you're sitting behind Colaris this season when Winnipeg hosts the Grey Cup. That's not fun. I don't care. It's not great. Trey Ford is going to have one of those seasons, I think, this year. If nothing else, it's going to be exciting to watch Edmonton Elk football this year just for Trey Ford. I mean, that's going to be worth the price of admission, not including all the running backs he's got to go and make the ball move the other way if he has to. He's also got a great receiving core if they sign most of them. But I think you may have hit on a point there. As much as we wanted to see G. Roy Simon and maybe even Jarius Jackson back, there was no way Trey Ford was coming back with those guys there. I can almost guarantee it. So, you know what? The ownership did the right thing. Clean house. See what you got with this kid. And I mean, if you watch any of the TSN guys, they'll tell you he's the next best thing. So, you know what? Edmonton believes in it. They believe in Trey Ford. Why shouldn't we all? I'm excited to see some Trey Ford football this year. And maybe even in game 1 against Saskatchewan, if it is.
Yeah, we don't know the CFL schedule yet. That should be coming out theoretically in the next week or two, any day now. It normally does in December. But Trey Ford, I think the 3-year deal, you kind of have to give him something like that to really commit to him and say, no, we're actually believing you and we're in it for the long haul with you. Do you think this was always in the cards? So the reason I bring this up is we were talking about earlier, and we could have talked about Trey Ford with the Mark Killam news, but I want to talk about Davis Alexander. I want to talk about Trevor Harris, etc. first. Do you think this was always in the cards for Trey Ford of planning to come back to Edmonton? Do you think it was always in the cards for Edmonton to go to the Trey Ford direction? Or is some of this a byproduct of these other dominoes falling in the first place where you can't get Vernon Adams, you can't get Davis Alexander, Trevor Harris is locked up again. We talk about, the starting opportunities drying up for Ford to go elsewhere and the opportunities for Edmonton to get a premium starter dwindling there as well. Do you think that impacted things, or do you think this was always in the cards?
I think maybe the Vernon Adams one might have impacted a little bit because, again, I think Vernon Adams was the big player in the game, right? If they got Vernon Adams Jr., Trey Ford might have ended up in Calgary. He may have ended up somewhere else, but after Vernon Adams Jr. went to Calgary, there was no other option, I don't think, for Edmonton. They know what they've got there. They know the thing that he does. You know how he plays. I don't think they wanted to bring in a different guy that they're not sure of, like, again, a Davis Alexander. They may have went after Trevor Harris, but again, a 1-year deal is not where Edmonton's looking at right now. They're looking long-term, and they want a quarterback for 3, 4, 5, maybe more years. So Vernon, again, Trevor Harris wasn't the guy. Alexander, I don't think, was their answer because they don't know Alexander as well as they know Trey Ford. And again, unfortunately, Fajardo's always overlooked, it seems. It's disappointing, but I think Edmonton, when Vernon Adams was gone, I think they just said, good, sign Trey Ford. And if you noticed, I think after Vernon Adams went, that's when Mark Killam all of a sudden showed up and they didn't go back to Jarius Jackson. They also then had brought in, I think just before that was Ed Hervey. So you kind of seen what they were kind of up to after that Vernon Adams deal got done. So I think that's what the case was in Edmonton. But hey, I like it. I think Trey Ford is probably going to be one of those quarterbacks that will be known in Edmonton for a very long time.
And we'll see who the backup ends up being. Like McLeod Bethel Thompson, the free agent, I can't see them bringing him back. Well, it is Edmonton, so I can see them bringing him back. But I think it would just be such a distraction after this last season and after
they will sign Chris. They will sign Chris Jones back as a general manager before they'll bring back McLeod Bethel Thompson.
We'll see.
Bold prediction, I know.
We'll see. Speaking of, not a bold prediction, I will tell you right now that when it comes to fantasy draft time early next season, Trey Ford is definitively locked in as one of my keepers for next season. There's a reason I made that trade with Trey to get him. It didn't pan out for this year, but I'm hoping I finally get that season with Trey Ford on my roster because I'm excited for it.
Well, and you know what? I made that one keeper trade that I made probably late in the season last year. Didn't get to use him much, but you seen who I traded for quarterback to keep for next year as well.
It's just going to be me and you again at the Fighting Weekly next year, isn't it? Like, Trey,
Mike will be there for a few minutes, and then Trey might just, win the first week. And
Yeah,
then
Mike and Trey, if you're listening, start studying up and get ready for next year's fantasy draft. All right, so those are our big coach, GM, quarterback news items from around the CFL. A couple minutes left. I'll just mention some of these other signings. We're not going to talk in depth, but I'll get you maybe your take on which ones are most notable or exciting for you from around the CFL over the past 2 weeks. Stanley Bryant signs 1-year contract extension with the Bombers. Defensive back Najee Murray, 1-year extension with the Alouettes. Linebacker Tony Jones, a 2-year contract with the Bombers. I believe it's defensive back Wesley Sutton. Is he DB or is he linebacker? I forget. DB, I think.
DB.
Yes, defensive back Wesley Sutton. 2-year contract extension with Montreal. They also signed Sean Thomas Erlington at running back to a 1-year deal. Christian Matt announcing his retirement from the Montreal Alouettes. Derek Wigan also did a couple of weeks ago as well. So a couple of Alouettes hanging up the cleats. But they've been busy. They signed Joseph Zima, their punter, to a contract extension. And the most recent one today, defensive lineman Isaac Adeyemi Berglund. Who else am I missing on this list? Charles DeBeyer signing a 1-year extension with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And BC Lions, I think defensive lineman Sione Teuma has been suspended for violating the CFL-CFLPA drug policies. So that's news. I'm not sure how 2 games this year. What stands out to you amongst this news list as the most impactful?
I mean, the first one, obviously, with Stanley Bryant being re-signed by Mike O'Shea, that's loyalty, so I'm not saying nothing on that one. Tony Jones, that's a big signing. I think he did earn his stripes, and I like that one for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Charles DeBreer was a big one for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Last year, injury, but was very good when he was in there as a defensive lineman. Joseph Zima actually is an interesting one for me as well. He had a pretty good average, I think, this year as a global punter for the Alouettes. That's a big signing as well. There was one other one that I was going to bring up here. It was Regina Ram was signed by the Rough Riders. Usually that doesn't bring big news. But seeing as his dad used to be a running back in Winnipeg, I thought I'd bring him up as well. That would be Sims, I believe it is. If I'm not mistaken, that's how you say his name? Or am I? Mims, sorry.
Mims, there we go.
Yeah.
I'll give you a
Mims was signed by Saskatchewan, so that was a pretty good one. Of course, he helped take the Regina Rams to the Mitchell Bowl against Laval and then lost at the last minute in a heartbreak. Overall, there's not really a big pile of news on some of those ones. Again, Sean Thomas Erlington, good depth running back. But you know what? The Alouettes are getting busy quickly. That's good to see, I guess. Adeyemi Berglund, I think, was a big signing as well for them. Good to see it. And, of course, they did sign earlier in the year was Tyrese Beverett. I think they gave him an extension as well. He wasn't due for one. They just gave him one because we're keeping you because you're that good. So, Montreal's getting busy early. Saskatchewan's got to start getting busy pretty soon here. They got lots to re-sign. Maybe not some of those secondary guys that we talked about, Amari Henderson and, Nelson Lacombo. I'm kind of a little bit no.
As we speak, I think Kenny Lawler just scored another touchdown. Adam's face. Adam's face. Of course, when we're talking about Amari Henderson, rough game for him in that West Final for sure. Of the Montreal ones, I really like Najee Murray. I really like Sutton getting contract extensions. Beverett before that. I think the linebacker defensive back crew for Montreal is phenomenal. Their pass defense was phenomenal this last year. Could use a little bit of work on the run defense, but I like that they're bringing those pieces back. And the most impactful for me is Tony Jones, that 2-year extension in Winnipeg, and I'm happy you touched on him there as well. I feel like I am much more of an offense guy. I could probably tell you who's at every position, maybe not offensive line, but all of the receiver, running back, fullback, etc. position on every football team. because it's very fantasy based. I'm not as much of a defense guy, but there are certain players that when I watch them really stand out to me on defense. And Tony Jones this year was one of those guys after he signed in Winnipeg where he is the Adam Bighill replacement in my mind. Either Adam Bighill or Kyrie Wilson, one of the two. I think he has to replace.
Honestly, if they go and they bench Tony Wilson, or Tony Jones, sorry, if they take Tony Jones and sit him because they're bringing back Adam Bighill, somebody grab Mike O'Shea and ask him where his loyalties lie. Is it to winning or is it to the player? Because, boy, that would be questionable.
Yeah, I can see him. I can still see Bighill coming back, but I think Jones has the potential to be the future at that position. He was so impactful in the games he played in this year. So happy to see him back there in the linebacking core. That was a nice find for the Bombers to be able to bring him in. How much was that Kyle Walters is doing? How much of that is New Hamilton Tiger Cats general manager Ted Gavaya impacting that potentially? Who knows? But nonetheless, these are all of the news items from around the last 2 weeks. We got through it in about an hour and a half, Adam. So lots of news. Hopefully we get more news in the coming days and weeks, etc. And we'll be back with more off-season updates for content here on the podcast when we have enough news to talk about. I've got some ideas for some other fun stuff we can do in between that maybe we can chat about for content here on the podcast. But until we have another episode out, make sure you follow us on social media to stay tuned when we have an episode coming. You can find us on X at CF Countdown Pod. You can also find us on Blue Sky by searching CF Countdown Pod there. Adam, I saw you join the Blue Sky world, or I don't know. Trey and I were trying to decide last time whether this is actually Adam or an Adam burner account, or is that an Adam impersonator? Because
if I've moved up to the world of having impersonators of me, I've done pretty well. But the other place you can also find out if you're looking for CFL news and want to find it all in one spot, just join the Discord channel.
Yeah.
Either I'm posting it or you're posting about it right away, or one of our many fans that love posting about the latest news and seeing who can get it first. Just by all means, check out our Discord channel. We're talking, like I said, CFL. I think the other night there, I was laughing about Blue Jay fans losing their mind because Juan Soto was not coming. Anyways, but there's all sorts of sports and all sorts of fun stuff to come talk about. Maybe I'll even throw a senior hockey Discord channel on there.
There we go.
So you can check it out as well. But hey, be sure to check out our Discord channel too.
Yes, thank you for that plug, Adam. Facebook as well, facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod. You can find us there as well. There's a lot of other great shows we affiliate with. The Canadian Football Podcast Network. You can find all those shows at CF Pod Network on X, and our friends at the Alternative Football Network at the official AFN on X. I believe there's an Alternative Football Network Facebook group as well, and alternativefootballnetwork.com to see all the other great shows going on there and all the people that I beat in fantasy football this season and hopefully continue to beat in the playoffs. Interesting playoff format. It's each round is 2 weeks. So the semifinals, weeks 15 and 16 aggregate score, and then finals, week 17 and 18. I feel like that benefits me as somebody who has averaged like 140 points a week, that I can't get eliminated by my first dud week of the season. So
that's awesome.
So
I mean, I'm let's face it. I mean, when it comes to NFL, I'm there for the fun and the laughs. I'm not really there for the wins. But when it comes to CFL and especially I've got a championship to defend in the CFL side of things now, so I've got to start training.
Oh, yeah. I'm coming back with a vengeance this year. Me and Trey Ford, you watch out. We're coming for you.
And I'm taking your old quarterback to the promised land.
Who do you have?
Vernon Adams Jr.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I forgot about that one. You were mentioning it earlier. I was like, who are you talking about? Like, don't you just have Trevor Harris and Shea Patterson or something like that?
I had that for a while, and then I suddenly ended up getting Vernon Adams Jr. for almost absolutely nothing.
Yeah, this year was a roller coaster. Let's just put it at that. But yeah, check out everything we've got going on in all the social places. You can find me on X or Blue Sky at Trooper42 on both of those there. I'm not super active. I thought I'd be more active on Blue Sky. Maybe I'll get there eventually, but I've got a lot going on. So you don't find me posting too often, but I'm there nonetheless. Trey is at Trey MB Harness. I believe he's joined Blue Sky now as well. So go follow him there or on X and everything he's got going on. I'll give a quick shout out to Trey as well. He started a new horse racing news website recently. What was it called? The Western Pacer or something like that? I should know the name, but go check that out. You can find everything on his X account at Trey MB Harness to go check out what he's doing with his horse racing stuff. And congrats to him for starting up his own site. You can see everything Mike's got going on. Mike at Mike Garrell on X. And like I said off the top of the show, make sure you go back and check out Mike's interview with Luke Wilson, former NFL tight end. It was a great interview, so go back and check that out. Adam, where can people find everything you're doing these days?
Well, you can find me at Adam Stewart 1 if you're wanting to check out that. If you want to know how my senior hockey team or my boys are doing, you can check out at Theodore Buffaloes. You can see them over there. Of course, this podcast is the official, unofficial podcast of the Theodore Buffaloes. So, yeah, you can go with that. I got a whole pile of places you can see me. You can see me on Instagram or Facebook or all there. But really, I don't have a lot that I'm posting right now. Mike, Alternative Football Network, Mike goes and wants to be the official coin of our fantasy league. I don't know about that, but I think we could use a coin probably just, every other week as well for when we do our betting. But we'll talk in the offseason here, Mike.
I do like this idea, though, that for maximum chaos in our fantasy league, how can we involve a coin flip? Save that for the general manager meetings this year.
Yeah, the GM meetings, I think they're coming up in January or February sometime. So we'll definitely be discussing crazy ways to make the league less fair for me to win. So anyways.
Maybe not a coin flip, but I can't guarantee I won't show up to the draft and ask AI to give me a random CFL skill player in each round and just pick that and see if I can beat you guys with my AI generated draft.
So we got virtual Ryan playing Ryan, actual Ryan. This is when the robots take over, isn't it?
That's the next step. $100 on Bo Levi Mitchell was phase 1 of my antics. Bring on AI.
Robo Ryan. That would actually be pretty fun. But nevertheless, you can find me all over social. Just look me up somewhere. You'll see me. I got my smiling face. You can't miss it, unfortunately.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us this evening. Coin team auto draft, only make necessary moves. Oh, that is an idea. I like it. We'll talk. I like it. Whatever podcast platform you watched or listened on, we appreciate if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends, help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. And on behalf of Adam, I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.